In spite of the huge investments in Nigeria's power sector, Nigerians groan in darkness despite power sector privatization. The inability of the privatized power sector to meet the demands of electricity users nationwide is causing pain and anger among power consumers as they express disgust over the privatization exercise. However, with the new government in place for almost a year, the various issues surrounding electricity supply in Nigeria still exist. Yet, the federal government is set to triple electricity tariffs for urban areas. Joining us now as we take a look at Nigeria's power sector reform, the privatization of GENCOs and DISCOs, the clamor for cost-reflective services, how the services will impact on efficiency in the sector, and what measures or policies are needed to strengthen the power sector for optimal growth and efficiency, is Professor Yemi Oke, a professor of energy and electricity law from University of Lagos. Good morning, Professor, and welcome to the morning show.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here with you.
Well, Prof, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you again. In your inaugural lecture in 2022, you talked about an answer in search of a question,
yes,
focusing on electricity law. But now, we have more questions in the electricity sector, now searching for answers. And the big question that we have this morning is on the front page of the newspapers. This report that the Nigerian government is going to increase electricity tariff by 300%, and that people in urban areas will now be paying 200 naira per kilowatt hour. They removed the fuel subsidy in May 2023. The minister told us that government may not remove electricity subsidy. Now they say they want to remove electricity subsidy. I know your position previously, I don't know whether you have changed it now, is that it is criminal for people to consume electricity and not pay. But, I mean, subsidy, yeah, we should have subsidy.
Thank you very much for the question you've asked me. And power sector is one area where we need to look ourselves highball to highball and say the bitter truth. I've always advocated, and I still stand by my position, that is one sector we need to get right. I'm being honest with Nigerians. We need to get it right for things to start to crystallize in the direction of progress and economic prosperity. Are we doing that? I would say yes and no. We've made a number of mistakes in the power sector, no doubt, and we now need to start to correct those mistakes. In several forums and media houses, and I said more than 15 years ago, and I'm still saying it, that this current structure on the power sector is not sustainable. As an energy expert, I felt we had too many subsidies in the corpus called energy sector, which includes the petroleum, the gas, and the power sector. When you have humongous subsidy in the energy sector generally, would that be sustainable? The answer is no. Coming now specifically to the power sector, I said we needed to, of course, Nigerians were not even aware until recently when some of us started amplifying that there is huge subsidy in the power sector. But if a government can't continue to subsidize darkness, if you're giving subsidies to Nigerians or for energy purpose of electricity, then it presupposes the fact that Nigerians are having power, which you have subsidized. Of course, in the petroleum sector, you subsidize and you have petrol in the filling station. But that is not the position in the power sector. One, government needs to restructure the regime of subsidy in the power sector. It's going to kill the Nigerian economy. It's about 3.3 trillion for this year. It's going to get to like 4 trillion and more. So what has been happening? Government shouldn't continue to subsidize production. That's why the challenge is. Government should, if there is going to be direct subsidy, it should be to consumers. We can't subsidize production because it's going to incentivize wastages and humongous production cost, because you've taken over their costs. So they're not going to be prudent in generating. So government has been subsidizing at the level of generation through MBER, Nigerian Bulk Electric Trading Company, or PLC. The way it happens is that to encourage production, because essentially we rely on gas feedstocks. So under the Petroleum Industry Act, the law says gas producers will have domestic gas obligation, meaning a quantum of the gas you are producing should be for local use, essentially for the power sector. The reality for those of us in the sector is that you're telling these guys to produce gas at a loss. Who does that? Gas is an international commodity. It's bought and sold in international market at prevailing international prices, and you are telling me to invest in gas production and give to the Gencos so that they will be able to generate for Nigerians, and then now we'll do that at a loss. In as much as we are not encouraging them to violate the law, it's difficult for them to comply with their domestic gas obligation. So the government is challenged. I'm challenged, you are challenged. I'm sure I can imagine the amount of diesel you run to sustain this station. It's killing. It's not the way to go. And I like to talk about the solution because I don't talk about the problems. The problem is, I said the power sector was going to collapse on all of us, myself inclusive, and it's about to collapse on all of us. And where my take is, essentially, is that, well, we now have somebody who appears to be a willing person, because I want to say that he had experimented this state involvement, decentralization of the energy sector, particularly electricity, even as far back as when he was a governor. Of course, that led to, there were some political issues in that, the botched errand. And I say, hey, given benefit of hindsight, if we had allowed the Lagos Errand project to sail through, by now, Nigeria will not be where we are in terms of energy. So now that we are now ready to revisit the thing and get it done properly, we need to get it done most patriotically, sincerely, and genuinely as a country. This is not a matter of saying what one needs to hear. We're in this challenge together and we need to fix it. There are a lot of issues in power sectors. Subsidy is not sustainable. Subsidy can be at the level of generation. And I know an average Nigerian is willing to pay slightly more for electricity. What Nigerians are not and will not be willing to pay for is darkness. So the issue of electricity tariff being increased, government doesn't even have government is not directly involved in tariff adjustment. I don't want to talk about hikes in tariff. We call it tariff adjustment. Sometimes it will go north, it could come south, depending on the amount of megawatts that you have to distribute. But we have been oscillating around 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts before privatization. Then that was under NEPA. Now we have the Discos and Gencos with their apparatuses, with all their structures, EDs, directors, and the cost of production is huge. If you are generating more, you can spread the cost. For instance, if you are generating and distributing like 20,000 megawatts, you can spread the cost over the 20,000 that you are generating. But we are generating 4,000 plus, and all the humongous cost and the jeeps of the directors and the rest is put around that. We need to restructure. And what I think the government is trying to do is to restructure for efficiency. It's not about it's not doing, the current administration is not doing anybody a favor by restructuring, because all of us are in it together. I don't want to go into that deep ditch of failure of a polity.
So, I hear you in terms of the need for restructure and the burden of subsidy. I think a number of people, what would be the concern would be that perhaps the removal of subsidy, electricity subsidy, without solving the issue, is almost like a cat and horse situation. Which should come first? And that's a big question that's always happened. For the masses, for the people, what we would ask for is fix the problem first, and then it's easier to convince people to pay more. And then not pay more whilst we are still fixing the problem. So in terms of restructuring, is there a better way? Is there a better option? Because 300%, don't just think of households. You talked about businesses. We're going to cripple small businesses. Unfortunately, already if you're paying high amounts of money for diesel, and then we look at electricity costs now, you're paying an exorbitant amount without getting, at least in the immediate, this light you're talking about. Should we not fix the problem? Let's look at the transmission, the grids collapsing, GenCos, DISCOs. Should we not look at that before we start to talk about electricity and a price and hike, or a hike in electricity tariff?
100%. But the way to solving or fixing it is what I want to talk about.
So tell us, so what does restructuring look like?
Well,
but I'd like you to a sustainable way that will not hurt the Nigerian people. Because let's borrow a leaf from subsidy removal. The argument had been made for a very long time that it was time for subsidy to go. However, the manner in which it was implemented was where the criticism came from. So a sustainable approach.
I got a point, clearly, I do. And I'm not advocating a kind of subsidy, electricity subsidy removal that will create needless shocks in the system. Yeah. I'm not. We've always had a mechanism in the law which was never crystallized. I objected to that. The Power Sector Reform Act of 2005 was a funny law that I've always been criticizing since it was put in place. I said it wasn't a law meant to operationalize the power sector by its name. It was Electric Power Sector Reform. It was a law to reform the power sector. Now that we are done reforming, let's have a law that will operationalize. Of course, I'm gladly they've acceded to that. Most of our concerns in the old law have been dealt with. But a lot of Nigerians are not aware that we have Power Consumer Assistance Fund, PCAF, even in the old law. PCAF was never operationalized. It was a structured pool of funds meant to subsidize low-income earners who wouldn't be able to afford hikes in electricity tariff. Gladly, under the Electricity Act of 2023, PCAF is also retained. Do we have PCAF in place? No. What would this administration do? They're looking in the direction of not giving subsidies to those who need subsidies. It's not going to be like something that is generally available for GenCos and DISCOs and all that. There will be, I expect, a bit of efficiency in the management of PCAF. Because in the UK, I always cite that example. If you get your electricity bill, those who ought to get subsidies, you see in the bill, £20 subsidy, which means subsidy goes directly to consumers, as again subsidizing production. If you are producing, for instance, like you have subsidized 5,000 megawatts, at the end of the day, by the net consumption is 2,000 megawatts, meaning you have subsidized 2,000 waste. That's not prudent, that's not sustainable. I'm not going to advocate that kind of wastages. That's one reform. Government should crystallize, put in place appropriate structure for PCAF. That will reduce the burden on average Nigerians. I don't think there should be that radical adjustment up north in tariffs by households. I don't think that government will want to go that route. Even if government is going to do that, best they will clock back about $1 trillion or substantial part of the subsidy and use it for the poor. Because the commercial users, you and I, we can afford to pay slightly more. They constitute 15%, but they are responsible for the 40% of what happens to the power sector. They are still willing to pay slightly more for electricity if it's available. They are not. Megawatts from generation, distributed generation, will still be cheaper compared to diesel and other options embedded. So whatever the adjustment, it is still going to be reasonable for commercial users okay, give me more megawatts, I'm willing to pay. Nigerians, even household consumers, are willing to pay slightly more for electricity. What they don't want to pay for is paying for darkness. And that brings in the issue of metering. Even the PCAF that I mentioned will still need to fix the over 20 million metric gap that we have. And that is why we always applaud the Prudential Metering Initiative as the way to go. I don't like the fact that we'll take one step forward, another one backward. During the time of the Fashola, we have CAPME, meaning credit application for meter initiative, meaning, you know, if you're waiting for meters to be installed in your house, that may take forever. So if you pay to get your meters, like 20,000, 18,000, then every consumption bill that you get, the net of the cost of meter has a plus for you. They give you megawatts over time. So at the end of the day, you have been refunded your money. But now we have MAP, meter asset providers. They extricated the metering responsibility and give it directly to companies. And the law says the GENCOs and DISCOs and those stakeholders should not have anything to do with MAP, so as to kind of ensure effectiveness without compromise. What now happens there is that indirectly, most of them own MAP. So we still need now, I now suggested M for M, meaning meters for meter manufacturers. Let meter manufacturers get directly involved in the metering initiative. Engage with them, just as you have the phones. The telecoms will sell you their lines. You buy whatever brand of phone that you want. If you want the gold-plated meters, they will supply. If you want high-end meters, they will give you. One basic meter, they give. They give it to you. If you want digitalized meters, they give it to. Give them the money, give them the incentive, whatever you want to give them. Let them now be faced with making meters available to Nigerians. Those are the kind of reforms we're looking at.
But I mean, good reforms, Prof. But the truth is, all of this we are speaking is grammar. You know why it's grammar? You don't have a grid system that works. And that's why it goes back to your talk about subsidizing at production. Why are we subsidizing at production when you don't have a grid system that works? So, and that goes back to the conversation about, is electricity a public good or a commercial venture? What are we going to do as regards the grid system? Because even most of the time, after embed pays the subsidy, the producers can't even load up on the grid because the grid can't take it. So all of this has become a case of babu. We're just joking. That's number one. Number two, let me even make your arguments better for you by saying the lower end has so many subsidies. The rural electrification projects too are some form of subsidies where solar panels are put in rural areas and they have access to power and things like that, you know, just to be able to target those underserved areas. And the fact that it is those in the urban centers that will pay more on the markup. But the problem that we have not really solved is the grid problem. We talked about Siemens a couple of months ago and all of that. How can we solve this grid problem once and for all?
Thank you. You raised 8 questions invariably. Let me start from the last one, Siemens. I will not go to the verification. I will not go back to the grid, because this is a very important point. I am gladly the president was in Germany talking about Siemens and the rest. I said several times in sister stations, and I'm still saying it. Maybe because of the experiences I've had of failures or challenges, I'm not as optimistic as to the miracles that the Siemens will want to do. And I have my reasons. Years back in 2016, when we started with Manitoba Hydro, the Nigerian government brought Manitoba Hydro for transmission management contracts. I wrote about that contract. They thought because I was privy to certain classified information, I said, no, you need not be a magician to predict the outcome of Manitoba Hydro. Of course, I wrote an article. That's one of the ways I engage the issues. I wrote and I decided to publish the University of Manitoba Law Journal, telling them what would come out of the contract they were entering into with Nigerian government. Like precisely 2 months after what I predicted, the exact thing happened. So you don't get to hear of Manitoba Hydro in Nigeria now. The transmission management contract between Nigerian government and Manitoba Hydro International is gone. Each time I travel to that side, they say, this guy. So I know that's a challenge. So Siemens could be miraculous, but I'm not seeing the signs yet. Because if you go and look at the benchmark timelines, we're way behind schedule.
We're way behind.
That is one. That's a challenge there. Of course, I know maybe I'll be possibly surprised if something might come out.
So you don't think we can get anything out of Siemens?
I'm not as optimistic.
But they work for Egypt. Why can't
No, I'm not as optimistic. Okay. I mean, Nigerian like you, I have challenges with the power sector. The way you have, I'm concerned. I'm an interested stakeholder. All of us are. I'm not as optimistic as to Siemens. I've been engaging them. I've looked at them. I know them. They say, Prof, give us a chance. We'll be giving you chance to try your stuff. But Nigeria is a country in a hurry for development. Now, the development must start to happen now. I don't care who's there in the presidency. Nigeria must start to get fixed now. So I'm not as optimistic. I'll be pleasantly surprised if Siemens does the magic. Number 2, you talked about relatification. I'm sorry to say, I hate that thing.
Really?
The issue is this.
Tell me.
Constitutionally, even under the unamended constitution, electricity was an item on the concurrent list. A lot of Nigerians are not aware. If you look at item 13 of the second schedule to the 1999 constitution, unamended, it gives federal government power to make laws in respect of areas covered by a national grid. That's item 13. Item 14 gives federal government power to, State House of Assembly power to make laws in respect of generation, transmission, and distribution in respect of areas not covered by a national grid. That was what the Constitution says years back. So before that, we now said we have this rural ratification agency and rural ratification fund. I said the word rural connotes off-grid generation. Yeah. If the Constitution says anything off-grid should be state, why are we having rural ratification agency? I said that was not constitutional because it ought not to be in the law in the first instance. Anything rural should be at the level of the state and local government. It shouldn't be an on-grid. It's not an on-grid. It's purely off-grid. I argue that. Of course, they amended the Constitution to now give state government power to make laws in respect of areas covered by national grid and areas not covered by national grid. Guess what? I was heartbroken when I still saw Rural Electrification Fund, Rural Electrification Agency in the Electricity Act of 2023. And I spent like 16 going to 20 years criticizing it, pointing it out. When they had fraud under a former known House of Reps chairman, Humongous documented fraud, I shouted, I did research stuff for some anti-corruption agency. You say it was captured from darkness to darkness.
So you think it should be scrapped and states should
I want to justify that. Yeah. Because we can't because we're talking about solution now, right? Yeah. So it's not, Rural Electrification Fund, Rural Electrification Agency federal government should not have any business with that. State government should be directly involved as to what happens at the rural area. Off-grid generation, captive, extensive solarization should be at the level of the local government. I even suggested something like 1 megawatts per one local government. We have 774 local governments.
Yeah.
Even every other year, alternate years. Meaning you have this year, you're not going to have next year. At the end of the day, in a 4-year administration, you're going to have 2 megawatts per local government. Multiply it, you're going to get the exact amount of megawatts that we have now.
Installed capacity.
So we have a challenge that we need to fix. So now, Rural Electrification Agency, they arrested some people, they dissolved the board. Still fraud. Fraud that happened under a particular, I don't want to mention names. If you Google it, you're going to get a person, brother of a major banker. I'm not going to mention anybody's name here. Documented, I investigated, I wrote report for certain
agencies. So you said that should be under the state, right? So state should be able to handle
that. Rural Electrification Agency should not have a place in the federal structure. Gladly, we are implementing all that song here. Okay. Rural Electrification Fund should be distributed to states so that state government can now engage their local government and get investors to start to do mini-grid, small-scale electrification at the level of the local government.
The laws now have opened the state up with that capacity to be able to.
So that's what I'm saying.
So Lagos has an electricity market now.
We've always advocated that because I said years back that we're going to have Lagos State Electric Regulatory Commission, Ogun State Electric Regulatory Commission,
Prof.
Prof. And we are there now.
We are running out of time.
There's one
there are so many issues. Your inaugural lecture, you had about 15 or 20 recommendations. The other question I would have loved to bring up would have been the discourse. Because the discourse will still be part of this.
Briefly speaking,
and these are overburdened.
There is a challenge now. The regulator is not sufficiently regulating. If you are presiding over an entity where you have 95% of discourse being technically insolvent, you are challenged. What are you doing? It's like the CBN and the banking system.
Definitely you'll be dancing disco if that's the case, Doctor. I think we did.
Anyway, even these discos, only 2 of them are really functional.
I didn't say that.
Well,
but I said 90, you should know what I was saying. I said 95 because I know even those songs are still easily exposed in terms of foreign debt.
Okay.
But then, it's another great conversation.
Thank you very much, Professor Yemi Oke, for joining us on the morning show.